welcome back to the Jenks Island Podcast, the only podcast where you get your takes from washed up Division III cornerback. I'm your host, Grayson Jenkins, and as usual, I'm joined by my good friend, Ty McGee. And today's episode would be a relatively short episode, but we're going to be breaking down the past weekend's conference championship games, as well as breaking down our rankings of the new head coaches, excluding the Saints' job because the Saints isn't locked. It's not locked in stone yet, but ranking those head coaches based on how successful we think they'll be. And I have a surprise question at the end I'm going to ask Ty that I think is a fun conversation as well for the NFL and where it's headed. Anyways, Ty, first things first, the conference championship games, I mean, the Eagles absolutely blew the Commies out of the water, but I think it was really due to the turnovers in that game. But I want to hear your biggest takeaway from that game. Do you think the Eagles are more successful due to their offense kind of turning around this year in general, or is it really just Saquon Barkley being the MVP and taking this team to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I really think Saquon taking this team to the next level is the big story here. Like their defense has really, really stepped up, right, under Fangio with some of these new guys. But I think he's taken this offense to a new level no matter what the rest of the team around him on offense has done, right? Like if Jalen has struggled, right, we had that portion of the season where, we were hard on Jalen and he couldn't throw the ball in the passing game, couldn't get going. And they were recognizing that internally too. Now the passing game's kind of got going, but Saquon just adds to that, right? Like if the passing game's going and you have Saquon, he's going crazy, you're going to beat the crap out of teams. If, Saquon's going and the passing game wasn't going, they were still winning football games. So, I think that is truly the big story for them. He put on an MVP caliber season, maybe, probably won't get that, but maybe offensive player of the year. But on the flip side, right, that defense, super duper impressive. I do think, Washington kind of did give them, some of those turnovers. I mean, they're just dumb. Like when you're fumbling the football that many times, like right after the first time, your coaches start telling you, hang on to the football. After the second time, your coaches start telling you, we need to hang on to the football. And the third time it comes around, it's like, man, what the hell are we doing? So, I was impressed with Jaden. I think he played well. He put his team in a position to win that football game. If I think it was the Eckler fumble, they were going down to score to tie the game, I believe it was. So
I think they would have put them down like 3 points. It would have been a really close game. Yeah.
Yeah. So regardless, close, right? And I think they were also at like the 50-yard line or close to their other side of the field. So, just shooting themselves in the foot, fumble on the first drive by De'Ami Brown and Rodriguez, so many guys just really gifting the Eagles opportunities. And talked about this a lot with kind of Buffalo. I think we talked about this in the Denver game. If you give really good players and really good offenses a lot of opportunities, they're going to take advantage of it. Like if you're punting the ball or turning the ball over a lot, you just have no chance. And when you give Saquon that many times to go out there and tote the ball, from midfield with fumbles or in really good field position, it's just a recipe for disaster. And the defense just didn't step up for the Commanders either. I mean, granted, it didn't step up against Detroit either, high scoring game, but I think not having Payne hurt them. The tackling effort on the first drive when Saquon ripped that one off was pathetic. So, my 2 takeaways, I guess, is just, Saquon has really leveled this Philly team up, not even just the offense, but just the team in general. I think the vibe is like really, really high. Yeah. And then I was impressed with Jay. I think, he put the team in position to win the game, and his teammates just did not help him. So.
Yeah, and like you said, I think the defense, like it did a decent job. It got a couple stops there before that Eckler fumble, right? And then they kind of were like in a spot where, hey, that the offense could go down and possibly score. But like you said, at some point you got to learn to hold on to the football. And an Eagles team is always looking to punch the ball out. They've been really good at that all season long. And the guys are holding the ball out way in front of them. And then that Eckler fumble, like you're getting up from the ground, you're taught to literally hold that ball extremely tight if you're going to try to do that. Yeah. Put one on the other and you just get up. But getting up and holding it away from your body like that is just insane, especially when there's someone right near you, right? If
he has small hands, that's the big thing with him. He's
Eckler,
been a guy that has small hands. I think Aikman or whoever was calling the game, like they called that out. That he's small hands and he's been known to fumble.
Yeah, if you like are in the wide open field and no one's around you and you're getting up like that, maybe you could pull it off. But with someone right in your face, it's a crazy move to pull. And I think the biggest thing, like you said, is just this Eagles offense is too high powered to get the ball that many times. It just fell off the wheels from there, which stunk for Jaden Daniels because he did have a great game outside of the fumbles being caused by other teammates, not his fault at all. The one other thing I really want to talk about in this one is the tush push and the blunder that happened at the end zone when the Commies start to jump off sides at maybe the yard. They're at the 2 yard line, then it got to the 1 yard line, and then from there it got to within 6 inches of the end zone. And at some point they're calling neutral zone infraction on the defense for the way they're lining up. But when you look at the play, the whole defense is lined up basically within the ball. Like the defense is lined up within the ball, and the offensive line, all of their helmets are in the same thing. So I think it's kind of a debate to me is should it be deemed an illegal formation? I want to hear your thoughts on this. Should it be deemed an illegal formation, and should the tush push be banned next season unless there are certain rules around it? I want to hear your thoughts just based on those two questions really quick.
Yeah, so two things, right? I think the first part is the illegal formation part. I did notice, right, like a lot of the offensive and defensive lineman helmets were like at the same level, which either illegal formation or you're offsides or something.
Exactly.
Weird, portion. The penalties too. I think the when they were calling encroachment, right, like the whole part about like it being intentional and like I was like, are you like dumb? Like, why would they be jumping off sides? They're just trying to time it, and like Philly is obviously using a hard count. So I didn't like that portion of it all, where they're kind of like making up. I mean, they didn't make up a rule. I guess it probably exists, but like that whole crap in the middle of the game where we can give them a touchdown. I mean, they're going to score anyways. But the other part is the banning it. Right? I hate the tush push. I think it's some weak ass shit, and but. I mean, they have perfected it, and other teams have tried it, and clearly, it's not like just a play that is unstoppable, right? We watched Buffalo do it, but I think the way that Buffalo did it was poorly executed, and not the same way that Philly does it. I don't think you can ban it though, because if you ban that, then you open the can of worms of pushing guys in general, right? Like pushing the pile and pushing guys in the end zone, which I'm not a big fan of. I mean, obviously you're a fan of it when it works out for you, but sometimes, man, I'm like, they got to blow this whistle. Like it's just like 11v11, just a scrub, like a scrum, like it's like rugby almost. So, I don't know. I mean, I think they should maybe look into the whole pushing thing, especially like the dragging thing. Cause I used to think that dragging the guy into the end zone was a penalty.
I'm pretty sure it used to be. If you grab the guy and you pull him, it used to be, I think, called like offensive hold. It used to be called, there was a penalty for it. Don't remember it at this time.
Right. And nowadays you see guys kind of throwing dudes into the end zone. So I think they need to look at all that as a whole, right? Like assisting the runner in any, attempt to, move forward. So I think, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. I'm also hesitant to say that they should just ban it unless they're going to ban all of the pushing and pulling as a whole. So, because it really opens that can of worms, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and I agree 100% with where you're coming from with the penalties, because like calling encroachment or anything like that, you kind of have to jump offside, or you have to guess the count to be able to stop that play when it's that close of a distance. Like that's their only shot, and they knew it, so they might as well try it. And at that point, the Eagles had no reason to be doing a hard count, right? They weren't like, you're not gaining anything from, we're going to get them to jump off sides at the 6-inch line. Like you're not gaining yardage. You're just trolling at that point. It was really dumb in my opinion. And the other side, I think banning, like you said, I don't necessarily agree with banning a play by any means, but I think necessarily what the NFL could do is either you can make the formation and change the formation that's legal for it. Either you make sure that all the linemen, because I think the Bills, when they're running it, obviously we see them fail a lot more, but it seems like the offensive linemen are all lined up in their normal legal positions. And then they have like the running backs a little bit further deep behind them, tight ends off too. So their formation's a little bit different. Maybe you make it so that running backs have to be 2 yards behind the quarterback or something like that. Or you make it, if they're running a tush push formation, they have to run that play and they cannot run anything else. Because at some point the defense is going to have every single player in the box, and they're just going to run a sweep outside and it's going to be a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it. They ran it last year with DeAndre Swift.
Exactly. They've done that before. And I think that like is a genuine possibility as well, unless you put some restrictions on that play because there's so many things that can be done for it. And as well as like you said, I don't know if you saw my tweet. I am strongly against any offensive players being able to push the offensive player forwards for extra yards after the defensive players are already there making a tackle, simply because the defensive players aren't able to do that, right? You can't get multiple defenders there to the ball, push them backwards, and then lose yards on the play. You don't lose forward progress.
Forward progress, and they throw a flag too.
Exactly. They throw a flag, things like that. So if a defender's making the tackle and a bunch of offensive players come and push them 10 extra yards forward, that the runner wasn't going to get on his own, I think that's kind of absurd. So it's a little bit of an NFL rules thing that they'll figure out this offseason, but I think that's an interesting discussion to have. Anyways, we got to move on to the next game. We got the Chiefs beating the Bills 32-29 and a really close game. Another game where the Chiefs get the best of the Bills in a close game. And it's going to be talked about with the refs, right? That's going to be a discussion in this game. Unfortunately, that isn't what lost the Bills this game, right? Because the Bills did have a chance. They had a chance at the end of the game. 3 minutes left, over 3 minutes left to go and take the lead, and the Bills couldn't get it done. That being said, the refs put their hand into this game very, very heavily when they decided to call it a catch with Xavier Worthy, right? The very contested catch where it seemed like the Bills safety had both hands on the ball. Xavier Worthy had one, but then it hit the ground and then they kind of switched around possession. So what's the deal there? And then the second thing was that spot in the 4th and 1 where Josh Allen seemingly got it. It ended up not getting it. And then someone had a video that showed multiple other spots for the Bills getting spotted way short, a yard to a yard and a half short multiple times in that game. So it's really interesting what was going on in that one. Ty, I want to hear your thoughts on this game. Do you think the refs had a factor in this one? And what are your thoughts on the Bills' future after losing again to the Bills or to the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, right, it's just hard to not recognize that there's some level of bias in these Chiefs games. I mean, consistently, right, they are getting calls that are all over Twitter, and you just don't see that for any of these other games and these other teams. So, you know, I don't want to be like, hey, blame the refs, but I mean, listen, put the Xavier Worthy, play aside. On, I think it was second or third down, Dalton Kincaid had the first down. Clear as day, right? Like everyone that's seen it, you hear about on sports talk, you hear referees like talking about like that's a first down, right? Then the Josh Allen one, also a first down, like clear as day. Like the scrum, it gets a little bit harder, right? Because you're in there and it's a scrum. But the Kincaid one was crazy. I think it was worse than the Josh Allen one. Like he clearly had it. You could blame the Josh Allen one kind of on the Bills not being prepared because the Chiefs had stopped them a couple of times or knew that they were going to run it to the left, right? Josh loves to go to that left and try to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you try to go to the right one time, like, at the end of the game there. So I think the Kincaid one was the most egregious one of them all because he definitely had it. It's unfortunate. And then, right, like at the end of the game, you said they did have a chance. Spags kind of threw an exotic, blitz at them, something they weren't expecting, sending that corner. So, props to Spags. I think he's a great defensive coordinator. I hate this fucking team, but I have a lot of props to Spags. He's a good DC. So
Yeah.
But I mean, again, they had a chance. Kincaid, he didn't get the first time the first time. Okay, catch that ball. The one thing I'll say, right, and I keep seeing this guy, I forget his name, but you know who I'm talking about, the little dweeby looking dude that's talking about, how he should have checked down to Khalil Shakir and,
Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
yeah,
I'm not
blanking on
sure
the
his name.
name.
Yeah.
Just add him when we send this episode out. But, he just I hate that shit, man. When people are coming out and like, oh, he had this guy, like, okay, you saw the Ryan Fitzpatrick tweet too.
360.
Like, yeah, 360, and he's got two dudes in his face, and there's a corner coming hot. Like, I mean, let's get you back there with a 280-pound defensive lineman running at you and a corner that runs a 4.3 flying off the edge, and you got to find the one guy that's on your backside. I mean, that part pissed me off too. But yeah, I think the refs definitely did have a little bit of a hand in it at the end of the day. So tough, and obviously I wanted Buffalo to win. Hate the Chiefs, but flag was fly, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's an upsetting loss. Obviously, the Bills had a lot of chances to win, and they still should have won that game. I think the coaching had a little bit of a factor in that. The play calling was kind of iffy towards the end of the game. Joe Brady was all over the place, and even right before their last touchdown that they scored, or one of their last touchdowns they scored with Curtis Samuel. they threw a third down fade to Keon Coleman on Trent McDuffie, and it was like, what the hell are we doing? Like, this is just, first of all, it's the best corner. It's your rookie receiver. That's not the matchup you go to. You throw it to anyone else, and it would have possibly made sense, but that matchup does not make sense for that situation. And then towards the end of the game, just some of the plays weren't great. But the reffing really, to me, it's like they got 14 points out of those direct decisions, right? The Chiefs, that's a 14-point differential, possibly. Obviously, the Xavier Worthy one, there's still a penalty on that play, so they would have gotten the ball. They still probably would have scored, right? But it's not like a sure thing. They wouldn't have been necessarily at the 4. I don't know if I remember if it was pass interference or if it was holding, because if it's holding, it just moves them like 10, 15 yards. Pass interference is at the 4-yard line. But then that spot really turned all of the momentum around in the game, changed the game a lot. If the Bills go down and score a touchdown there, all the pressure's on the Chiefs. And so the game would be a lot different. I hate to be like talking about the refs in this situation, because obviously you want it to be just between the Chiefs and the Bills, which team made more plays. The Bills didn't have a single turnover except for that turnover on downs. The Bills played seemingly the better game offensively all game until that point. And when that happens, it changed the script for the game, sucked. And now it's going to be a pretty bad spot in the light of the NFL. And we could see maybe in the future if mechanical spots come in instead of ref spots, because like you said, the ref from the top of the screen coming down had him at the first down. The ref at the bottom of the screen moved it backwards a yard, overruling the other ref. So what's going on there? We'll see in the future seasons how they fix that and how they
They
change.
got to get VAR into the game. I mean, we have it
Yeah.
in tennis. We have a golf ball flying in the air. We have, in obviously in soccer, like they tested the chip last offseason. They're like, oh, it takes 10 minutes. There is no way in hell that we can track a golf ball's like velocity and track in the air and where a tennis ball lands on the line and where a soccer ball goes over the line. But we can't test where a football goes past a marker. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it's 2025. You got to figure it the hell out.
Yeah, and in soccer, you can check literally where a person's like forearm is in comparison to another person's leg halfway across the field for an offside. It's like there are a million ways that they could do it. They did it in the UFL last season, I believe, they tried to do a virtual like spotting system, something like that, and it seemed to work pretty damn well. So the NFL needs to fix its ways, or else there's going to be a lot of ways where people could conspire that the league is rigging games. So we'll see how they change it in the future. Anyways, switch from the playoffs going into our next upcoming season with coaching. The head coaching positions have been filled, 5 of them. We got Pete Carroll going to the Raiders. We got Aaron Glenn going to the Jets, Liam Coen to the Jaguars, Ben Johnson to the Bears, and Brian Schottenheimer going to the Cowboys. A decent round of head coaching hirings, but Ty, I want to hear your rankings. Who do you rank at the top for most likely to succeed and at the bottom for least likely to succeed? Let's hear it.
Yeah, I think, at the top of the list is the top of the list that I had for best coaching opening as well. I think Ben Johnson, he's a great fit there in Chicago. I like the staff that he's assembling around him. I do have a little bit of a question about the OC. There's been a lot of success with tight end coaches coming into the offensive coordinator's role, but Denver's tight end sucked. I mean, maybe that's not Declan Doyle's fault. Maybe it's just personnel issue, but I like Dennis Allen as the DC, right? Bad head coach, but I think he's going to be a pretty good DC. And I just like, Ben Johnson, obviously a creative offensive mind. I imagine that he'll be more involved in the play calling. And they have the best roster by far. So, I imagine them having the most success. Probably then at number 2, I would go with Glenn. He gets New York, he gets the Jets, he played there, he scouted for them. I think he'll be able to maneuver things with Woody a little bit better than maybe some other coaches would, because he's so well respected by Woody. They drafted him very, very high. And he's been around. So, and it sort of does depend on the situation with Rodgers, but I think give him some time, give him a chance to bring in a young guy. I also like the hiring, obviously of Chris Banjo as their special teams coach. A lot of guys really, really respected him and how hard of a worker he was in Denver. So, that would be my number 2. I think at number 3, then I'd probably go with Pete Carroll. Obviously, I hate the Raiders, but I respect Pete as a USC guy. I think he's not going to a great situation, but I do think he has the full backing of Brady. I like, obviously he's bringing in some guys that are familiar to him at the OC position. I think they're going to retain Patrick Graham as well, who not a bad DC. Just not dealt the best cards there. But they do have some foundational pieces, and Brock Bowers and Max Crosby, and I mean, Russ was not great in Pittsburgh this year. But he looked fine at sometimes, and maybe he resparked something with Bevel there and Pete. I mean, I'm not a believer in that, but when you look at the other two spots below, I don't know. I mean, Coen was close for me at 3. That interview was corny, I guess. Like, you could say
Yeah.
Dan Campbell's was kind of corny, but he was kind of just feisty. Like, the Duval was just like so freaky and weird,
Yeah.
and like, I don't know, everything that he said was like cookie cutter. So I do have some concerns there with that. I know he's a good OC. He comes into a situation with a pretty good quarterback, good wide receiver, but they have a lot to do. I ranked them pretty high initially because I do like some of their pieces. I just don't think that the interview was definitely, or the press conference was definitely a little concerning. And then
Yeah.
last is just Shoddy. Maybe Shoddy could be a good head coach. I don't really, hasn't been a bad OC. His dad was a head coach. He's been around. I think ranking him last in just terms of success rate is just because of the situation he's in. If they lose Micah, with Jerry Jones being so involved, what's the long term of Dak and CD? And outside of that, there's not much talent there. The corners are always getting hurt. It's just, I think that is more of an indication of the roster, the salary cap situation, and Jerry Jones. I mean, Dak coming into this year, I think, has an $80 million cap hit because they deferred so much of the money. So,
Yeah.
it is for him. It's not as much about Shoddy. It's more about the situation that he's in. So I think 1, I'm going to go with Ben. 2, I'm going to go with Aaron Glenn. 3, I'm going to go with Pete Carroll. A close 4, Liam Coen. And then 5, Schottenheimer. And honestly, whoever the Saints hire, I think it's going to be last, especially with McCarthy out. Looking like it might be Kellen Moore. I'm hoping it's Kellen Moore so that Denver can get Rizzi as our special teams coach. I'm not too low on Kellen Moore. He's had his ups and downs for sure, but I think right now he's definitely a bit of a product of the players around him.
Yeah.
He's had some success for sure, but he's also just not going into a great situation cap-wise. What's up with Derek Carr? Team's a little bit older, so a lot of question marks there too. But
no, I agree. I'll just quickly, I'll agree with you on Kellen Moore. I think he's a question mark as a leader too, because you don't really see him necessarily being really animated at any times. You see him kind of laid back behind the scenes, and he's still like a good offensive mind. It seems. Obviously, he has good players, and we'll see if he can contribute to the Saints as well if he does end up coming. But it's just like you said, there's a lot of question marks with the Saints organization, the roster. So any coach coming over, it's going to be hard to succeed. Anyways, for my coach rankings, I agree with you on 1 and 5, but so at number 1, I got Ben Johnson. At number 2, I'm gonna go with Pete Carroll, and here's why. It's not because I think Pete Carroll is gonna come in and turn the Raiders into a Super Bowl franchise, right? I don't see that happening. But I don't see that as Pete Carroll's I don't see that as the reason he was hired. I see Pete Carroll being hired to turn this team culture around. Instead, he's only going to be there for what, 3 years? He's an older coach. I don't see him lasting more than 3-4 years on the Raiders. And I think he's just there to kind of, get this roster turned around, put it in a decent shape, and turn the culture around. I really think that he's a great guy for doing that. I don't think he's going to outbeat the Broncos, the Chargers, or the Chiefs in his time here, but it's a really tough job for him to come in and do that right off the bat with this roster. But just getting this Raiders culture turned around, because it's been all over the place the last 4 to 5 years. The roster has been all over the place. And now even your star players and Max Crosby and other players on the team, just you don't really know where their head's at with this team. And they're all over the place. So I think he's going to come in, just level the boat and get it steered in the right direction. At number 3, I got Liam Coen, because I think, like you said, I think he has a lot of question marks regarding his personality and his leadership. The Duval thing was really weird, but also his first thing being said is that he really wants honesty, right? And things like that after what he did with the Bucks and that whole situation. And there are some news reports out there that he was talking to like Baker Mayfield and some of the Bucks players that whole time. But just the fact that didn't really seem like he communicated with the Bucks front offices very well at all. In that situation, just left to go to the Jaguars after they fired their GM after he already committed to being the offensive coordinator. Just doesn't really scream honesty to me, and that's what he's saying he's going to base his whole coaching style around. But he has the roster to succeed there, and I think he has the offense in mind to succeed there as well. Number 4, I have Aaron Glenn, just because I think the Jets are always going to be the Jets. Their situation sucks. What are you going to do with Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams? If you keep them, who knows? It could be the same offenses as last year. And if you don't keep them, then you got to deal with some dead cap, and you got to find a quarterback, find a receiver to replace Devontae possibly, because you got rid of Mike Williams. You still have Garrett Wilson, right? You still have young pieces on offense, but their team's just not in a great spot. The ownership there is shaky. The organization's shaky. So it's a tough spot for Aaron Glenn to succeed. And then 5, I got Shoddy as well. Same situation as what you said. I just feel bad for the guy, right? He's hired, and it's a good spot for him to be a head coach, being promoted from the OC, but it's just a tough place to succeed with Jerry Jones at the helm, and we'll see how he can turn it around from there. Anyways, Ty, the surprise question I have for you, so we don't run too long in this episode, is how can the NFL fix their Pro Bowl? Because at this point in time, each loser of the Pro Bowl, they make $44K. The winners make $88K. And we see dropouts we've seen dropouts almost like every other day this week of players getting dropping out, saying, I really don't care for the Pro Bowl, getting replaced with an up-and-coming player just placed in. And it also seems like a popularity contest as well, which it usually is, but it just really seems like players don't really care anymore. It's no longer an actual football game. It's a flag football game. Then they have the games as well. So it's all over the place. What would be your first thing to fixing the Pro Bowl?
Yeah, so, if I look at it at what would I really want, I'd want us to throw it all the way back to 2004 and how physical and high scoring the Pro Bowl was. But, based on what the reality is, right, I think the best case scenario is you continue with the flag stuff. I think some of the other stuff is fun. They used to do that back in the day too. They do like a longest throw and stuff like that. I would throw it back to the activities that they did back in the day. I think they did the longest drive, the bench press, all that. Do all those, right? Because none of those really required, the physical aspect of the game or anything like that. For the flag game, and I believe the Rising Stars game does this in the NBA, I would start doing a flag game that's either the U.S. versus the world or maybe some countries, kind of prepping us for the Olympics. If some of these NFL guys are really going to play, start to do something like that. Or maybe you do, NFL guys versus, the U.S. the U.S. flag team, at least maybe do that 1 year to prove that we're definitely better, right? The NFL guys are better than those U.S. flag dudes. But I think if you want to keep it to the NFL, right, I think the U.S. versus the world would be fun because I think a lot of these guys that, maybe don't get some of the opportunities, or you just don't know that some of these guys are, international guys besides seeing the sticker on the back of their helmet. I think that'd be a fun aspect of the game. The NBA's done it. And it definitely kind of, helped out. I know the WNBA is also done. The WNBA actually did the USA versus the W, which was right before the Olympics, to prepare the Olympic team. So I think it'd be a fun idea to kind of mix in that country or, U.S. versus the world aspect of it all, if we really are going to go all in on the Olympics as well, kind of prepping us for that.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that would be a really fun way to do it because, like you said, gives some insight to what we're seeing. We're going to see at the Olympics in the however many years, and then in between Olympics, you kind of still get to see that every year. In my eyes, I think what they could do is each quarterback picks a team. They obviously that you vote for the Pro Bowlers, whatever, but each quarterback picks their team, and then they do a flag football tournament. I think could be one way to kind of make it better instead of doing Peyton versus Eli. Having the NFC and the AFC, make it so that they're mixed teams again, so that players are playing with different people, things like that. And then I think another way, an interesting possibility would be, I don't know how they would be able to get it done, but you see the MLB and the NBA, their all-star games are mid-season, right? And they're there because the seasons aren't over. Players aren't just kind of ready for the offseason, going to Cancun, whatever. If you move with Roger Goodell trying, I know he's trying his hardest to add a week to the NFL season. Maybe you see a second bye week come in, and maybe they make that the All-Star or the Pro Bowl weekend, and then they have the games or a flag football game, something like that. Or maybe you give it like a 2-week bye week, something like that. Which I don't know if that's feasible, but I think that's the only other possible possible thing you could do to make it a little bit more fun for the players if they don't do what you said or what I suggested is like a tournament, something like that. Because right now, I just don't think the players are bought in, and I just think they could care less half the time that they're playing these games. Because why shouldn't they? Right? It's after the season, they're ready to go on their vacations, get some rest on their bodies, and they don't really have much to play for in these games.
The hard part with the end of the season too, right? I mean, just look at a guy like Bo Nix. He's kind of got to get that surgery so he can get back into training. Like a lot of these guys are injured at that point in time. So if you're just doing a flag game, right, you're not playing, tackle football. I think it's definitely easy to do midseason, right? A lot of the guys will be a bit healthier. Maybe there's a bit more buy-in because it's like a bye week and you're playing flag football. Like, nothing crazy is going to happen. So yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and I know like people will say like, oh, they'll get injured or whatever. Half the players are jogging half this game. Like they're not really playing very serious. And like you said, if they just do the competitions instead of an actual Pro Bowl flag football game, it's not gonna affect the players' bodies, I promise. But so we'll see how the NFL chooses to go about it in the future, but it's really players and NFL pundits, everyone's starting to realize that no one gives a shit about the Pro Bowl anymore. So we'll see how it goes this week. We'll see how the games, I think they have the skill games, whatever, tonight. We'll see if anyone tunes into that. So see how it goes. Next week, we'll be back with our Super Bowl predictions, breaking down the Super Bowl, every matchup across that game. And then after that, we'll be figuring out our offseason schedule, what we want to do, breaking down prospects, the free agency period, all of that. And we will get back to you guys next week. You guys know where to find us on social media at Jenks Island, as well as anywhere you get your podcasts, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever at Jenks Island Podcast. We will see you guys next week.